You wake up tired, not physically tired, mentally tired, even after sleeping, even after doing nothing. And then the guilt starts. You tell yourself you're lazy, undisciplined, weak. You look at other people who seem productive, focused, energetic, and you wonder why you can't just get up and do what needs to be done. You promise yourself you'll try harder tomorrow, but tomorrow feels the same, heavy, slow, drained. And the worst part isn't the exhaustion, it's the shame that comes with it. But what if you're not lazy? What if what you're feeling isn't a lack of discipline, but mental exhaustion? There's a difference between laziness and exhaustion. Laziness is not caring. Mental exhaustion is caring too much for too long. Laziness feels light and indifferent. Mental exhaustion feels heavy and overwhelming. Laziness avoids effort because it doesn't want to try. Mental exhaustion avoids effort because it doesn't have anything left to give. And most people who call themselves lazy are actually just overwhelmed. Your brain is not a machine. It doesn't have unlimited processing power. Every thought you overthink, every decision you stress about, every emotion you suppress, every expectation you carry, it consumes energy. Mental energy. And unlike physical tiredness, mental exhaustion doesn't always look dramatic. You can still go to work, still attend classes, still respond to messages, but internally you feel drained. Modern life constantly overstimulates your brain. Notifications, news, social media, comparison, pressure to succeed, pressure to look successful, pressure to stay connected, pressure to stay informed. Your nervous system rarely gets a real break. Even when you're resting, you're scrolling. Even when you're relaxing, your brain is consuming. And your brain never fully powers down. Over time, this constant cognitive load builds up. Decision fatigue sets in. You struggle with simple tasks. You procrastinate not because you don't care, but because your brain is overloaded. Starting something feels heavier than it should. Small responsibilities feel massive. You stare at your to-do list and feel paralyzed. That's not laziness, that's depletion. Mental exhaustion often comes from emotional labor too. If you are the strong one, the responsible one, the one who listens to everyone's problems, the one who doesn't complain, you are carrying invisible weight. Suppressing your own emotions while supporting others drains you. Acting okay when you're not okay drains you. Pretending you're fine drains you. You may not even notice how much you're holding in. And when your emotional system is overloaded, motivation drops, not because you don't have goals, but because your nervous system is trying to conserve energy. When you're mentally exhausted, your brain shifts into low-power mode. It reduces drive, reduces focus, reduces initiative. It's not sabotaging you, it's protecting you. Think about it. When your phone battery drops to 5%, it dims the screen, slows background apps, conserves power. It doesn't suddenly become lazy. It adapts to survive. Your brain does the same thing. But instead of recognizing depletion, you attack yourself. You call yourself undisciplined. You compare yourself to people who might not be carrying the same internal load. You ignore your own context. Maybe you've been stressed for months. Maybe you're dealing with unresolved emotions. Maybe you're burned out from constantly trying to meet expectations. Maybe you've been in survival mode for so long that your system never reset. Burnout doesn't only happen at jobs, it happens in life. When you spend years trying to prove yourself, years trying to be enough, years trying to avoid failure, your nervous system stays on high alert. Cortisol stays elevated. Your brain stays tense, and eventually it crashes, not dramatically, quietly. You lose motivation, you lose excitement, you lose drive. And instead of asking, "What drained me?" you ask, "What's wrong with me?" Mental exhaustion also comes from overthinking. When your mind constantly replays conversations, predicts worst-case scenarios, analyzes every decision, questions your worth, compares your progress, it never rests. You may look still on the outside, but internally your brain is running a marathon. That constant mental chatter consumes glucose, attention, emotional bandwidth. It's work, invisible work, And invisible work is the most exhausting because no one sees it, not even you. You might also be exhausted from carrying expectations that aren't even yours. Family expectations, cultural expectations, social expectations. You chase goals because they look impressive. You push yourself because stopping feels like failure. You try to stay productive because resting feels guilty. And slowly, productivity becomes pressure instead of purpose. When everything becomes something you should do instead of something you want to do, your brain resists. Resistance isn't always laziness. Sometimes it's misalignment. Sometimes it's your nervous system saying, this pace isn't sustainable. There's also emotional exhaustion from unresolved pain. If you've been suppressing sadness, anger, disappointment, or grief, your brain spends energy containing those emotions. Emotional suppression requires control. Control requires effort. Effort drains you. You might say, I'm just tired all the time. But what you might actually be is emotionally overloaded. Mental exhaustion often shows up as procrastination. You delay tasks not because you don't understand them, but because initiating feels overwhelming. Starting requires activation energy. And when your internal battery is low, activation feels impossible. So you escape, you scroll, you binge watch, you sleep more, and then you feel guilty for escaping. That guilt adds more weight, and the cycle continues. The problem isn't that you lack discipline. The problem is that you're trying to operate at full capacity while your internal resources are depleted. Discipline works when energy exists. It fails when exhaustion dominates. Another reason you feel mentally drained is lack of meaningful rest. Real rest isn't just sleep. Real rest is mental stillness, emotional safety, freedom from performance. When was the last time you rested without feeling like you should be doing something else? When was the last time you allowed yourself to exist without proving anything? If rest always feels earned instead of allowed, your nervous system never fully relaxes. And a constantly tense system cannot generate motivation. You're not lazy, you're overstimulated, overextended, overthinking, overresponsible, underrested, undersupported. Laziness doesn't come with guilt. Mental exhaustion does. If you were truly lazy, you wouldn't feel bad about not doing more. The fact that you care so deeply about your productivity proves you're not indifferent. You're tired. But here's the important part. Mental exhaustion doesn't fix itself by pushing harder. Forcing productivity when you're depleted often leads to deeper burnout. What actually restores energy is awareness. Start asking different questions. Not why am I so lazy, but what has been draining me? Not why can't I focus, but when did I stop feeling safe enough to slow down? Sometimes the exhaustion is from constant self-criticism. Living with an inner voice that never says good enough is exhausting. If your mind is always evaluating you, judging you, comparing you, correcting you, you're living under internal pressure 24/7. That pressure consumes energy. Rebuilding mental energy starts with reducing unnecessary load. That might mean limiting digital input, creating small pockets of silence, setting boundaries with people who drain you, saying no to responsibilities that aren't yours, processing emotions instead of suppressing them, allowing imperfect work instead of demanding perfection. Energy returns when pressure decreases. It also returns when you reconnect with meaning. Doing things purely out of obligation drains faster than doing things connected to purpose. Even small shifts, like reframing why you're doing something, can restore internal motivation. And sometimes what you need isn't more discipline, it's compassion. Self-compassion reduces stress hormones. It calms the nervous system. It allows recovery. You've probably been strong for too long, responsible for too long, alert for too long, and now your brain wants safety. Mental exhaustion is not weakness. It's a signal that your internal load exceeded your capacity. And signals aren't accusations. They're information. Imagine telling someone who just ran a marathon that they're lazy for lying down afterward. That would sound ridiculous. Yet you mentally run marathons every day, overthinking, suppressing, worrying, performing, and then shame yourself for needing rest. You don't need more shame. You need recovery. Recovery doesn't mean quitting your goals. It means adjusting your pace. It means understanding that sustainable productivity requires cycles of effort and restoration. It means recognizing that your worth is not measured by constant output. You're not lazy. You're mentally exhausted from trying to hold everything together. And the moment you stop attacking yourself and start listening to yourself, something shifts. The heaviness begins to make sense. The guilt begins to soften, and energy slowly returns, not because you forced it, but because you removed what was draining it. Your brain is not broken, it's tired. And tired things don't need criticism, they need care.